Hey everybody, it's Joseph Armendariz here, wearing my Pen Dreadful fedora hat. So this episode is entitled Wicked Old World. What we saw from last episode, episode 2, is toward the end of the episode, Detective Michener and his friends are following and tracing every step the Nazis who are infiltrating the city of Los Angeles. Um, you have a the scene start out with an aftermath if you did see episode 2, so spoiler alert. Detective Mitchell's friends were following and tailing the German operative with his Gestapo bodyguard, trailing him down in what it looked like being a local through the roads up towards Elysian Park. And it was basically a trap. They knew they were being tailed by Mitch and his friends. We're just friends. They're not police officers. They weren't savvy in terms of how to trail anybody, and it was quite evident they were trailing them. It was a trap. The Nazis killed them and burned their car. So episode 3 opens up with Michener grieving at the morgue. Um, the birdies were burnt up. He lost his friends. He lost his fellow comrades, so to speak, that were helping him in trying to trace these Nazis. We move on to Detective Diego Vega's family. His younger brother Mateo is consoling his older brother who got shot during the melee in episode 1. He recovered, and Mateo's very angry. You know, he's a teenager and he's getting influenced by the Zoot Suiters. The Spanish kind of version of the word that they're using is Pachuco, but basically it's just a Zoot Suiter. And his brother's upset by that because you got to realize that his brother, along with the fellow protesters, were blue collar workers trying to make a better life. And they were involved with this melee, as we saw from the end of episode 1. And his brother is getting pulled into different directions, Mateo is. So he saw the Zid Suiter, the character called Fly Rico, stand up to the cops. And so he's inspired by that. And so we see his brother trying to reinforce kind of those work ethics that his family was raised in and tell him not to get involved with the Zoot Suiters, also known as Pachucos. And so there's that struggle that Mateo's also facing, just like his brother, Detective Vega, who's kind of trapped in both worlds. Is he a cop or is he a Mexican American citizen who's fighting for their rights in battling the police force who seems to be very racist? Meanwhile, this is going on. You have Detective Vega still kind of weaving his way into the Sister Molly world. And as you recall, Sister Molly is the evangelist who's being actually pushed by her mother to kind of rake in the money. It's more of a business rather than a true evangelism. And her mother is considered the dragon lady because she just has her claws into Sister Molly and wants everybody to stay away from her, including Detective Vega. But you see them developing a romance. They're both cautious. They know what this potentially could mean. And take in mind that we're dealing with extreme racism at this time. So here you have this Latino male um, befriending and somewhat romancing or having a romantic interlude with Sister Molly. It's all PG at this point, but you can see that relationship developing. And they do both have good chemistry. They're both good-looking people, and it just works on screen. So as I mentioned before, episode 1 kind of threw everything at you to establish what was going on. And as we see moving forward, that you see some of these characters develop and you get a little more insight into their background besides their professional careers. And that also is also the case with City Councilmember Townsend, who's part of this transit authority, who's also being peddled and pushed by the Nazis. But also remember, his right hand woman, so to speak, his name is Elsa, is also Magda in disguise. And as you remember, Natalie Dormer plays Magda, the demon woman, the evil saint, or just basically the devil. And she plays four different characters at this point. She plays Elsa, the councilman right hand woman. She plays the distraught German immigrant that's trying to seduce Doctor. I forgot his name, but the German doctor who actually is a German operative as well, trying to push the Nazi agenda. So we have her playing Elsa. We also have her playing the German woman, and we also have Magda playing another character called Rio, which we see in episode 3. Now, prior to get to that, going back to Councilman Townsend, what we see throughout the episode is that everything is not always what meets the eye, right? There's always something hidden behind that. So this anger and this frustration that Councilman Townsend has kind of has revolved into what his private life has become. And I won't tell you what happens exactly, but let's just say he's not attracted to women. Leave it at that. But you'll see what happens moving forward in the episode if you do watch it. So moving off to the doctor played by Rory Kinnear. The German doctor is so infatuated with Natalie Dormer's character, Alex, who is also Magda. Now, Alex purposely was to set up an appointment for the following week, which she does not show up to. So the doctor becomes concerned, but it's more about infatuation that he wants to see her, that he leaves his practice, cancels all his appointments, go to her house, and that's where we see the evolution of Alex moving and kind of entangling the doctor into her web. So she sets up this whole elaborate scene where her son Frank is outside crying. And if you remember for episode 1, Frank is actually the demon seed inside Alex because she swallowed up Alex through her abdomen at the end of episode 1. He's out there portraying that he's hurt, he's crying. She runs in to see Alex, and you see Alex beat up. She's portraying herself as a battered woman to gain the sympathy of the Nazi doctor, right? And so he's falling for it. And little by little, that's how Magda, this demon woman, gets into everybody's psyche. She whispers in the cops' ears to do a shootout, basically incites violence. She creates the Councilman Townsend, tries to mold him into this great city official so she can manipulate and destroy a certain segment of the population, as well as trying him to get involved with the Nazi operatives that are infiltrated the city. Now we have her playing Elsa, I just mentioned, Alex, the German woman, and Magda the demon. Now, later on in the episode, you see Mateo, who was basically mesmerized by this Zoot Suiter, Fly Rico, in episode 2, that he shows up to the club that he and his fellow Zoot Suiters / Pachucos hang out. And as you walk into, it's called the Crimson Club. It's a beautiful, elaborate setup. You have theatrical performances here, the great production, where you see, if you go back to the 1940s, or even when you think of Count Basie and his elaborate setup of dancers, and it's a great scene where the cinematography is excellent. You have the choreography of the jitterbug and all the zoot suit dances, and the it's just amazing. So he goes in there, and Fly Rico sees him. You see Fly Rico and doing this elaborate dance because he's the cock in the pen of hens, right? He's the shit, so to speak. But even he is influenced by another woman, and she introduces Mateo to the queen of the Pachucos or the Zoot Suiters, and it's a character called Rio, who's dressed in this elaborate feminine zoot suit with a red hat. Now, throughout this series, you got to pay attention to the color schemes they're using because they're using this as metaphors. The red hat, the red hair, the red lipstick, right? So when you look at this elaborate kind of seductress zoot suit woman, it's no other than Rio. Rio is Magda. So here we see the demon woman again infiltrating different segments of the population to create havoc, to incite violence. So after this elaborate, in the middle of this epic dance routine, the cops rush in. The same cop who beat up Mateo at the hospital in episode 2, with 40, 50 cops, enforcing a made up curfew because he doesn't want these kids to gather. The main reason why, because they're Pachucos, they're Zoot Suiters, right? He doesn't want this group of people gathered together, and at this point, nothing's happened. They're just having fun dancing, right? So in the middle of this, Rio steps in there. Rio gets insulted by the cop, calling her a dyke, a white bitch, trying to be a Mexican, and this and that. And so what Rio does is turns around and just cold cocks him right in the face. That same cop that Fly Rico stood up to, right? He just cold cocks him right in the face. It starts another riot in the club. You cut to Rio, Fly Rico, Mateo having this little powwow, maybe down the street. And she again is putting those thoughts, those words in Fly Rico and now Mateo, that they should fight back. They need to get together and fight back and fight the cops and again create more violence. So we just see this evolution of just everywhere Magda goes, she infiltrates a different segment of the population in Los Angeles, taking on different characters. And this is played brilliantly by Natalie Dormer, because here you have an English actress who knew nothing about the culture in Los Angeles in 1938. And so obviously with research and practicing, she's taking these specific types of people and becoming them, because her accent is good, the way her speech patterns are good, and so I gotta give it up to her. Natalie Dormer playing 4 different characters, and it works really well. And so we see this come to a culmination where there is something big stewing, and as I mentioned before, eventually I think what's going to happen is that you're going to see the culmination of the Zoot Suit riots, which is a true event that happened in Los Angeles, also known as the Sleepy Lagoon event. So the episode 3 ends with Detective Michener summoning his friend Detective Zavado. Oh, excuse me, Detective Vega, played by Daniel Zavado, to come and meet him for a drink at a local bar, local cop bar, right? And so as they're drinking, they're talking, and Detective Michener, played by Nathan Lane, tells Detective Vega he's going to take some time off. He's going to bury his friends that died. He doesn't tell him how he died or the reason for their death. And while he's doing that, he has a valise with him and tells him what he discovered about Sister Molly. Turns out in episode 2, the big uh, subplot of that story was one of the Sister Molly's evangelist administrators, his name was Hazlitt, was killed. So Detective Michener did some research, kind of followed the trails here, and what it turned out was Hazlitt actually used church funds to buy a love nest out in Malibu, and then it turns out he had and was continuing an affair with Sister Molly. Now this takes Detective Vega back, because obviously he has an attraction towards her, and he believes everything that Sister Molly's saying about her innocence, and that she's just a regular girl doing this because the mom's basically forcing her to do it. And Detective Mitcher's not buying that, and even refers to Detective Vega and tells him, "Grow up. These things are happening," and he refuses to believe it. So in episode 4, I think you're going to have a confrontation moving forward. I think there's going to be a confrontation. To what degree, I'm not sure, but you're going to have a confrontation between Detective Vega and Molly. And I predict Molly's not going to know anything about it. She's going to play dumb. And we'll see what evolves with that relationship. Meanwhile, what you're having is you have also Rio, again, Magda, infiltrating the Pachuco Zoot Suit culture, and she's conspiring with Mateo and Fly Rico to create a riot and go after the cops. You also have Detective Townsend. As I mentioned, keep an eye on the episodes further. His sexual preferences are coming to fruition here, and Elsa's trying to backpedal and try to help him out because she is getting him involved with the higher up in the Third Reich, and they're trying to basically slowly take over LA, including having the Third Reich company pave the new freeway, which is the Pasadena freeway. And you also have the struggles between Mateo, Detective Vega's younger brother, and his older brother Raul, who was part of the original protest and is recovering from his wounds. So we'll see where all that evolves. Obviously, some things are going to come out to play. One last thing, towards the end of this, or in the middle of this episode, we have Detective Michener, who tracked down that Caltech kid who's being recruited by the Nazis. But that Caltech kid won't give up his sources. He said he'd rather die because it's going to be better than what he would face otherwise. So we'll see what evolves with that relationship between Detective Michener, the Caltech student who knows a little bit more than what he's basically letting Detective Michener know. So stay tuned for episode 4. It'll be next week. When you get a chance, don't forget to see episode 3. Like I said, a lot of these characters are unfolding. It's building and building. It's going to be great. It's a great show. Enjoy the cinematography. Enjoy the great acting by Natalie Dormer and all the other cast of characters. Okay, keep it here on Zenny62. Don't forget to like and subscribe.